Been a while since we've done one of these, but hey, doesn't that help it feel all the more special? If you're new around here, welcome to The Little Things, a seasonal roundup where I recount my fondest highlights of media and pop culture headliners over the past 6 months. We'll be making stops at my personal meccas for YouTube and podcasts, TV and film, music, gaming, reading, cartoons and animation, and travel and culture, largely as my own personal parade of things that brought me joy, but also, I hope, recommendations for you as well. So, sit back, relax, and by all means enjoy sharing with me and appreciating the little things.
We're gonna make viral videos so we can become internet famous. Panda, you know those 50 million views had at least one girl in there.
Internet ladies.
Tales of the Lost is a media hunt series by Ray Mona, whose talent I can only put into perspective as a documentarian and explorer of this media by showing that she seemingly never left a case cold, hunting down everything she sought out and a few things she hasn't. Whether it's the Nintendo DS Mean Girls video game or the Lost Saint Seiya media, above all else, she truly shook up the world of animation preservation, having unearthed the failed pilot for an American adaptation of Sailor Moon. As a huge Sailor Moon fan, it was refreshing to see the history of the IP before my time, and Ray's menagerie of interviews and findings span from awe-inspiring to bizarre, as she explores the mystery of this attempt at Americanizing a classic in a fashion only someone of her inquisitiveness and creative spark could be capable of. It's always strange to see how easily a work of art can be buried with that in mind, but a lot has changed with avenues for small independent projects, like Kickstarter, where everyone can publicize their idea, no matter how amazing or insane. And for the latter, we have the podcast Your Kickstarter Sucks, where every week, hosts Jesse Farrar and Mike Hale gather a handful of the most ridiculous of running Kickstarter projects and give them a good roasting before they fall into obscurity, with the energy of a night of making fun of retro absurd infomercials. And if such a vibe with products like cat toothbrushes, fidget steer grips, and a portentous fourth eating utensil sounds like your cup of tea, give this one a try with your daily commute. Arguably the kingpin of cartoon YouTube, Pan Pizza is a content creator I've followed for a long time now, and perhaps my mention of him in highlight reels such as these has been overdue, though I think there's been no better time to plug him than in the wake of, quite possibly, the best video he's ever made, his retrospective of Cartoon Fridays, one of the biggest you had to be there moments that made growing up a Cartoon Network kid so phenomenal. And Pan's video perfectly zeroes in on the particular brand of brain poisoning kids in that parameter wound up with, when every commercial break could be a celebration or an event using an eclectic range of characters. This feeds perfectly into Pan's long-established house style, capturing a very particular pre-streaming area of millennials who were plugged into pop media long before it was ever normal to be. And all of this blended with Pan's thorough and thoughtful analysis, which made for a mini-documentary that warmed me on a deep level, especially in the wake of how unfairly Cartoon Network and its adjacent creators have been treated in the wake of Warner Brothers' new management. Pan, no matter how much the media landscape changes, keep enjoying junk food and movie rentals in dimly lit rooms. I know I'll be doing the same. This won't be the first time I've praised the work of Harry Partridge in one of these videos, but it felt germane to revisit him as he's recently released maybe my favorite video he's ever made, Ghostbleed, the Bio-Horror, a multimedia animation made in loving homage of PS1 survival games like Resident Evil and Metal Gear, a lampoon with painstaking care and detail that put me in awe when the razor-sharp script didn't have me in stitches. From dimly lit, shoppily animated FMV live-action intros, to corny voice acting, to heavily polygonal characters in action, Harry shows boundless love and commitment to PS1 gun games, right down to the sound of a PS1 chugging to load the next sequence of the story. Oh, I love it.
Sometimes I gotta move the antenna, sometimes I lose the remote, and sometimes my butt itches real bad.
Danny Sanders has an unfulfilling job at a magazine where she dreams a trip abroad may bolster her own reputation and position as an influencer. To that end, she takes to photoshopping herself into images of Paris and using them to posture that she's on a fashionable vacation, earning attention for her worldly content despite having never left her New York apartment. Danny rejoices at the newfound attention, but finds her phone is lighting up with notifications, not because her vacation posts are so fun and trendy, but because Paris was ravaged by a terrorist attack not far from where Danny claimed to be vacationing. Unable to part with her newfound fame, Danny finds herself in over her head, keeping up the charade of a witness of a global tragedy she was never present for. This is the entirely possible and hauntingly dystopian story of Not Okay. Simultaneously one of the most grim satires and bonkers comedies I've recently watched, a breed we're sorely missing in today's film landscape, as I haven't seen a movie balance harsh reality with screwball comedy so well since the heyday of National Lampoon. I could compliment a lot about this movie, from Zoe Deutsch's great performance to the way the film cuts its comedic elements with the harshest of realities. But I think the bottom line comes down to the fact that even as an avid user of social media, I can't help but feel that if this movie hasn't portended something in real life yet, the advances and horizons of technology will render it a harrowing reality before long. Prey is the newest in the long-running Predator film franchise, but also oxymoronically the oldest in the series' chronological canon, taking the timeless appeal of the Predator creature and placing it in the unforgiving wilderness of 18th century Comanche territory, where the infamous alien headhunter sets its sights on the land's indigenous warriors. The directing pedigree of Dan Trachtenberg of 10 Cloverfield Lane fame emphasizes the more horrific elements of this film's Predator, using the less contemporary setting to isolate the characters he chases in these desperate, brilliantly choreographed struggles for life and death that, despite all of that, spare none of the classic, over-the-top action Predator is known for. A very sharp script, combined with some extremely sagacious staging for both suspense and action, make this not only the best Predator film since the original, but yet another personal favorite streaming experience I've had this year. Adapting stage musicals to screen is never an easy task, but the Netflix-sanctioned screen adaptation of Matilda the musical may be the single best endeavor I've had the pleasure of watching. Who'd have thunk asking someone with history directing the original musical to direct the movie too would be beneficial, bringing along the up to 11 character choices and electric choreography to the screen in seamless fashion by abandoning any pretense that a film adaptation needs to beget some big change, allowing the show's terrific songs and stage dressing to speak for itself. The stories and characters of Matilda remain timeless, as made better than they've ever been by an astonishing cast. I love Lashana Lynch as Miss Honey, Emma Thompson steals every scene as Miss Trunchbull, and Alicia Ware's Matilda is maybe the most poised child performance I've ever seen in film. They all stand high as my definitive versions of these characters. That should be high praise given these characters' long histories in literature. I have similar praises for the Game of Thrones prequel, House of the Dragon, which makes a ton of the same brain chemicals hit that Game of Thrones did way back in its good old days. Khaleesi was never my favorite character the way she was for a lot of people, so you'd think keeping up with the Targaryens would be a hard sell for me. The exceptionally proud yet brutal nature of the House of the Dragon made their intrigue just as satisfying to follow as the best of the Starks and Lannisters. Matt Smith's interpretation of Daemon Targaryen may stand among my favorite of the Ice and Fire universe, which says a lot considering the absolutely massive populaces those parameters contain. Horror comedy is a genre combo that has had a recent renaissance, but I find myself troubled by the fact that many seem to think comedy needs to be a relief from horror rather than something that adds to it. Matters like these are what caused movies like Barbarian and the new Scream to not stick with me the way others have. And what these movies in my eyes fumbled in balancing these tones, the Menu carries and excels with in flying colors. The tensity and mystique of the Menu is the yin to a yang in form of genuinely galling comedy, and the incredulous characters and absurd stakes thrown at them are sources of levity that don't let the viewer escape the dread of the story. Rather, it twists your guts with anticipation as the worst evening of these patrons' lives grows more and more insane with each course of what they thought would be just another high-end dinner. Besides how well this movie complements the Renaissance enjoyed by Anya Taylor-Joy and John Leguizamo, This is one of the most beautifully shot and finely detailed movies I've had the pleasure of enjoying this year. I want to assure you that if you give it a try and go in knowing as little as possible, you'll enjoy every bite. Well, those are all pretty credible recommendations as far as I can tell. I am going to talk about how much I enjoyed Black Adam now. Yes, I'm serious. Yes, I'm serious. People seem to dislike Black Adam because it truly resembles a Marvel movie that was left out on the counter for a day too long. But weirdly, that seems to be exactly what I needed to cure my fatigue with the genre. Gotta admit, I really liked Black Adam. Maybe it's how curt the movie is and how brutal the titular character is capable of being. Maybe it's how the JSA characters' personalities and decorum blend modern and retro superhero ideals in a way I think comes out pretty beautifully, how much I genuinely like the world of Kahndaq, or how surprisingly faithful the movie was to Black Adam as a character. One of DC Comics' most nuanced and interesting, a morally ambivalent champion of what he sees as justice, no matter how brutal or destructive, and how these traits lent themselves to some really memorable action scenes. Call me contrarian, but I was stimming in my seat, thoroughly enjoying this one. I don't know if the hierarchy of power in DC has changed per se, but I didn't regret a single second I spent in the theater recliner watching Teth Adam make the world a little darker for heroes and villains alike.
Gimme! Oh, this is my jam right here.
What? This song sucks.
You may recall Carly Rae Jepsen is the woman who drove the entire planet to the verge of lunacy in 2012, but you may not know she's made a comeback and has hit a distinguished stride era a decade later, combining a retro sound with a characteristic sense of humor and eye for campy music videos that has made her new album The Loneliest Time a gem in the pop genre, well worth unearthing. Though when I'm not white boy dancing to pop, I'm working or unwinding to jazz. And I think Adam Blackstone is the modern icon of the genre, creating soulful arrangements deep with sincere meaning and nuanced marshalling that transcend the genre and even the notion of fusion. The track's composing legacy more resemble free-flowing poetry with rhythm and accompaniment than just one type of music, and I mean that in the best possible way.
Give me some quarters. I'm doing my laundry.
Yeah, right.
Where's the video boxing?
It's over there in the corner. But if I were you, I really would use those quarters for laundry.
As someone who loved the first Splatoon and missed the bus on the second, you don't always hear me gush about how Splatoon is just one of the most effortlessly fun ideas for a game ever. Squid's having a turf war with their ink, and the maker of the bigger mess is the winner, completely vandalizing urban areas with quarts upon quarts of paint is just as satisfying as it sounds, win or lose, helped by a slew of fun weapons. Though I think it's the spectacular world of Splatoon that has allowed the series to retain such a vice grip on the gaming zeitgeist. Every environment for battle or exploration is built like a richly detailed amusement park, inhabited by characters who are just impossible to forget. The various vendors and shopkeepers of the hub world representing different corners of an already cohesive culture, while Deep Cut puts on bombastic shows overflowing with flair and style. The story campaign is riddled with peaks and valleys, but those peaks are incredibly impressive, and the culminating boss fights are unforgettable, especially the grand finale, which ups the ante in a terrific fashion, and I won't give away a second of it. Splatoon 3 may be the best case scenario for a technical post-apocalyptic territory. The worst? Well, that's Endling. Extinction is Forever. A game where you play as the last mother fox on a dying Earth tasked with keeping her cubs alive. If that sounds like one of those press A to make a sad thing happen indie games, that couldn't be farther from the truth, as the onus of such a grave matter is on your button-mashing fingers as you scavenge food, traverse traps, and navigate dubious humans to keep your precious offspring safe. The game is ruthless, but equally rewarding. For every genuine gut punch I endured when I couldn't procure food in time for one of my spawn, costing me its life, my heart would warm when my cubs would reach an experience level of capability of rummaging for food on their own. Though the truly stunning thing about Endling is the game's environments, which you explored in an interesting gameplay style I'd describe as Pikmin meets Metroidvania. Every inch you explore, you feel the cold wind cutting against you and reddening your ears. You're exposed to spot-on world building and are made familiar with the vulnerability of your characters, which makes every step away from your den a huge risk, yet one that's ostensibly worth it to unfold yet more of this harrowing but beautiful universe inhibited by this game. You may be able to surmise by how often I cite it as a favorite of mine that I love River City Girls, but I'll admit I was a bit apprehensive about the sequel, which looked more like a DLC campaign than a full-blown second installment. But as I tried the game out, I quickly learned that was not the case. While the core gameplay and returning characters are largely left intact, there's a great deal to discover in River City Girls 2's environments, gifted alongside two phenomenal new characters in the former damsel of Double Dragon fame Marion and the stylish Provy. These eclectic newcomers are the perfect vehicle for traversing the newly expanded River City, which dwarfs the structure of its predecessor with even more diverse enemies, characteristic shops, and a Springfield-level colorful charm and life. While the game can be played pretty linearly, I often lost huge chunks of time punching through every corner, searching for Easter eggs and power-ups. The game's addictive combat and incentivizing options make no time spent grinding for money feel wasted or boring. That, combined with newly intentioned grander stories compared to the last game, makes this a second round well worth investing in. But if you prefer your video game heroines a little classier, look no further than Bayonetta, who in her third outing adds raucous kaiju wrangler to her resume, as the focus of Bayonetta 3 revolves around smashing clinical chimera to a pulp by possessing massive monsters of various powers and effects, in a fashion that the gameplay weaves in a surprisingly intuitive fashion. Despite the fairly notable change to the game's combat, the theatricality and sheer spectacle of Bayonetta has gone nowhere, and you can still expect to make complete playgrounds out of the cities and valleys you dare to be challenged in, wielding guns, blades, mic stands, and yo-yos along the way. Deciding whether or not I had time to sit down and play Bayonetta 3 wasn't a matter of, do I have a sec to knock out a few levels? It was if I had the wherewithal to fully appreciate a cinematic roller coaster, and I'd expect nothing less from the mad folks at Platinum. And if that's not enough giant monster trotting for you, I certainly got my fix further from Pokemon Scarlet. I know I pointed and laughed at the glitches as much as the next guy, and I'd be remiss not to acknowledge them as a self-appointed critic, but as a Pokemon fan, man, this game made my heart full of wonder and affection for a Pokemon adventure that I find myself at the mercy of no matter how frequently the series seems to cut corners nowadays. The new gen of Pokemon has some great standouts, tall among them the game's Legendary, one of the best ever because of how intentionally they're woven into the game's narrative and your emotional adventure. When Legendaries often feel like stern, secret weapons introduced at the last minute, this one feels like your friend from the very start. And that's within the first moments of a story that goes to some insane places I don't want to give away. I hear mileage on this one varies a lot. My experience with the game so far runs fine, but other people are encountering lots of glitches and bugs. But the broad world of Pokemon is as imaginative and welcoming as ever. If you know me, you know that DC superheroes, classic cartoons, and prestige HBO TV and film are some of my favorite things, and that insanely specific cross-section of things was catered to in spades by Multiverses, initially resembling a Warner Brothers attempt at a Smash clone that blossomed into something that combines such platform fighters with the competitive edge of a multiplayer capture the flag. The insane detail and distinction put into each character of Multiverses, making strategizing far more than planning to knock the opponent out, as each character brings to the table a specific win condition to work toward, which may look like Taz literally seasoning his opponents to a vulnerable point, Arya Stark risking her fragile frame with up-close contact with larger fighters so she can use stealthy tactics to stun her foes, or Tom and Jerry needing to rely on one another for their strongest moves. It's quirks like these that makes Multiverses' emphasis on team battles extremely worthwhile, creating a competitive meta that's pretty intuitive to wrap one's head around, thanks in no small part to the shorthand language made easy by these iconic characters. It's been a long time since a game has wrung hours out of my free time like this one has, and I'm excited to see what Player First has in store for us next.
What are we gonna do?
Let's not panic. Surely the library has shelves devoted to this topic.
I Lie Popeye is an officially sanctioned manga take on the famous cartoon Sailor, inspired by and commissioned to the talented artist Marcus Williams. Influences in way of Dragon Ball and One Piece color this original Popeye story with peerless love and imagination, translating the rubber hose antics of the Sailor Man into sheer shonen bombast, in a fashion I've simply never encountered before. The way these characters so organically shift into muscle-bound anime warriors, but still retain their Fleischer-born charm, cannot have been an easy task of design. No small part of what makes this wildly entertaining webcomic something to behold. If you're close to my age, there's a good chance you grew up watching iCarly, and if you're invested in how productions like these can impact its younger stars, you owe it to yourself to read I'm Glad My Mom Died, an autobiography by Jeanette McCurdy, the woman who played Sam on iCarly and hated every second of it. The out-of-this-world perils of child stardom aside, McCurdy has led an extraordinary life, often for the worse, going through harrowing things that caused me to frequently drop the book in my lap and just gape at how someone could endure such wild developments. If it sounds heavy, it totally is, but McCurdy's prose is exceptional at both painting memories and illuminating levity, making the text impossible to put down. It should be at the top of every reading list.
There's tiny clay figures moved around one frame at a time by an antisocial shut-in.
Those people are called animators.
This fall, I saw one of the most deeply moving and sincere movies I can recently recall. The main character fucking looks like this. It's difficult to quantify what makes Marcel the Shell with Shoes On a fucking masterpiece, but hot damn, it's one of the most authentic pieces of art I've ever gotten to watch. The story of a little guy who lives in a dormant house, where the brilliant makers of this film came up with all these ways he passes time and functions, using snack wrappers, pencil erasers, and keychain rings in these adorably inventive ways, in scenes that are shot dimly and deal with forlorn subject matter, but in a way that's distinctly comforting. I'm not a consistent crier at movies, but this one had me making it rain. The collaboration of Dean Fleischer Camp and Jenny Slate begetting an astonishing story about separation and change. One that reminded me of a few lessons I'll certainly be repeating to myself now and then about grace and courage, messages I think everyone could benefit from. Okay, movies with messages quota filled. Time to talk about Dragon Ball. Stupid title aside, Dragon Ball Super, Super Hero, is a laser-bright delight. A story that puts Goku and Vegeta on the back burner and bestows a rarely narrow focus to Gohan and Piccolo as they fight a revived Red Ribbon army. These circumstances allowing for a vibe and story that harkens back to Toriyama's roots in the more grounded stakes of classic Dragon Ball, and even at a couple points Dr. Slump, with slapstick humor and memorable characters. That's not to say the pure adrenaline you come to Dragon Ball 4 is at all missing. I think theater cheer moments are a little played out, but the big reveals in the midst of this movie's climactic battles had me grinning ear to ear. Though, maybe such rowdy action isn't how you like your anime, and if so, I recommend Call of the Night. This series is about a young boy who deals with insomnia-addled sleepless nights by making friends with a super hot vampire, as one is wont to do. Call of the Night isn't what I would call slice of life, but slice of night? It isn't aimless by any means, but it isn't an action serial either. Through its expressive art style, chilled-out music, and messages of confused but sincere youthful longing, it has the vibe of a nighttime walk. You probably aren't out that late if you don't have something to do, but the night is so serene and pretty that also by virtue of the late hour, you find yourself taking your time, breathing in the neon that lights the way, the curiosities of graveyard shift businesses, and this show is all about appreciating those little things, super hot vampires notwithstanding. On the topic, no stranger to such a vein of creepy creatures is Mr. Henry Selick. And a decade and change post-Coraline, the macabre director has brought his twisted point of view to a new movie. And if a pedigree to the tune of Nightmare Before Christmas is any indicator, Wendell and Wild is full of snazzy demons and grand-scale shadow worlds. Selig's trademark eye for the absurd levels of details, breathing layers in life, and some of the most unique characters he's ever put to screen is not something you want to miss. An opportunity to reunite Key and Peele in any context is cause for celebration in my book, as the pair's performance as the titular Demon Brothers are among my favorite characters introduced this year. Jordan Peele and Keegan-Michael Key have always had this impeccable chemistry, to the point that seeing them play brothers here damn near challenges the reality that they aren't. And their bouncy repartee lends itself phenomenally well to Selig's recognizable style that I'm so happy to see in a feature film again. These are all factors that made Wendell and Wild one of the most visually interesting things I've had the pleasure of watching this year. And you may double take when I say Up Here in Such a Race, not far off, is the Nickelodeon adaptation of Big Nate. I love seeing newspaper comic characters adapted into animation. The way they reach this universal ubiquitousness through tiny panels is kind of magic, and I love seeing those small, lax worlds put in motion. And Big Nate may be the show to do so with a style I can only describe as Spider-Verse meets Diary of a Wimpy Kid. The characters possessing this exaggerated dimension and shape, and moving in a choppy, key pose-emphasized action that emulates the frozen structured framing of a comic strip, retaining the spirit of Big Nate's original medium in cartoon panels perfectly, in a way that I feel you could divide an episode of Big Nate into storyboards and have a feasible supply of 3-panel gag strips. But these strong poses and expressions wouldn't have a leg to stand on without incredibly witty writing. The show is fast-paced in a fashion that might be tiring if you're at an age where your back hurts, but to be energetic and thunderous is not to be in any way dumb. The show carries itself with a lot of inquisitiveness for something about middle schoolers. To have a constructive adaptation is a dream for comic fans, and I think fanatics of a certain Chainsaw Devil can attest to achieving a similar thing. I bounce back and forth between wholesome core and absurd blood and guts shows a lot, if these videos are any indicator, and the nice thing about Chainsaw Man is it kinda does that for me within its own runtime. Chainsaw Man is about the most depraved, heinous, figurative, and literally bloodthirsty characters you can fathom, and the thing that makes those walls fall over for them. It's garish and explosive, but raw and intensely honest when the characters settle down face to face. The animation has this fluidity and warmth that lends itself well to the equal probability you'll find a city-leveling action scene or a tender conversation over drinks every time you turn it on to watch. I feel like every time I review a new wave of shonen, I say, oh, I get why this is the new craze of action anime. But this one really is something special. I don't see anyone perfecting the balance of mania and humanity this show has down to a T.
They have a piano backstage they warm up on.
No, we would have heard it.
What do you think? They just crack their knuckles and come out?
This winter, I had the pleasure of attending Pixar Putt, a pop-up installation that came to my revered hometown of Denver, where man-children like yours truly can enjoy playing mini-golf in the colorful grasp of Pixar IP. I love anything that puts effort into setting foot directly into one of your favorite works of art, and the engineering and artwork at play here is truly impressive. I had a lot of fun catching up with my friends over 18 holes, as you can see recorded here, and I'll always cherish memories like those, made in the Mile High City's chilly metro with the people dear to me. I was also able to scour into the city late at night, ticket in hand, for a live performance of my local Colorado Symphony, accompanying the peerless vocals of the one and only Bernadette Peters. I have a lot of love for Miss Peters and her career over the years. Her distinct resonance, stunning beauty, and unmistakable stage presence has long made her a favorite star of mine, whether dazzling in Annie, making me sob on The Muppet Show, or just inspiring awe as the witch in Into the Woods. And well into this year, she's still got it. Her iconic voice untouched from her prime, and her magnetic ability to work a crowd on full display. Even from my cheap mezzanine seat, Bernadette was still kind enough to flash a smile out of her way and make sure we all got an amazing little cabaret from her Broadway repertoire. And if she comes to your town next, I cannot stress enough, you share in the same unforgettable experience I had. But my favorite little thing? The people who sit down and watch me ramble about stuff that's special to me. That's you guys! I hope you can find a bit of similar joy as we move forward into the new year. May 2023 be most exceptional, and thanks for watching.